together.
프랑스는 유럽 정치, 경제, 문화의 중심지고 한국은 동북아의 거점 국가입니다. 서로에게 매력적인 시장임에 분명합니다. 한반도에 평화가 정착된다면 한국은 더 좋은 투자처가 될 것입니다. 나는 지금이 한불 간 경제 협력을 발전시킬 최적의 시기라고 자신 있게 말씀드립니다.
President Moon pointed out three important agreements he reached with his French counterpart Macron. First, to drastically boost trade in not only aircraft parts or cosmetics, but also investment funds. Secondly, adapting and expanding ties in new industries that are in line with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The president cited the developments between a South Korean research team and France's Renault Motor into the implementation of electric vehicles starting 2020. And third, upgrading ties between startups and SMEs to widen options for young Koreans and French entrepreneurs. And the president is already putting words into action by having Korea's auto giant Hyundai sign a memorandum of understanding with French firms to promote hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
The U.S. and Russia have agreed to work together to achieve North Korea's final, fully verified denuclearization. And as part of that process, Kim Jong-un could be getting ready for a visit to Russia. Kim Yo-sun explains.
Washington's envoy in charge of North Korean affairs, Stephen Biegun, met on Tuesday with Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov and Igor Morgulov in Moscow. The U.S. State Department said the two touched upon issues surrounding the Korean Peninsula as well as those related to the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and arms control. It explained the two sides agreed on full coordination to bring about North Korea's final, fully verified denuclearization, or FFVD. A department spokesperson said the talks were warm, friendly, and they explored a number of areas of cooperation. Biegun's trip to Russia comes a week after his North Korean counterpart Choi Sun-he's visited the country. While many speculate the two would meet soon in Austria for working-level talks, there are reports North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may visit Russia in the coming weeks. Quoting various sources, the Russian daily Izvestia reports that Kim's visit may come before the U.S. midterm elections in early November. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis says there has been progress in denuclearization talks with North Korea. Speaking to reporters earlier this week on board a flight to Vietnam, Mattis said it's been difficult, but negotiations on the North dismantling its nuclear program have moved forward, and those efforts will continue. Mattis also said that despite the U.S. and South Korea having partly suspended their joint military exercises, military training and cooperation is ongoing. The defense secretary brushed aside speculation that he will be replaced, saying he has never spoken with President Trump about leaving his position. In September, South Korea's exports in the information and communication technology sector rose to a record high for a single month. It was thanks mostly to semiconductors, which have been booming this year. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A report released on Monday by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy shows Korea's ICT exports rose by more than 5% on year in September to nearly $20.3 billion, the second straight month it has surpassed the $20 billion mark. The country's ICT trade balance also marked its highest monthly surplus of around $12.3 billion last month, as ICT imports stood at $8 billion. The lion's share of the exports was semiconductors, which also recorded a monthly high in September of a combined $12.5 billion, a near 27% increase on year. It's the fifth straight month it has topped the $10 billion mark. Shipments of memory chips and DRAM soared by 44.5% and by more than 54% on year, respectively. Exports of displays rose by more than 11% on year to nearly $2.6 billion due to an increase in OLED panel shipments. However, the report notes how exports of LCD large panel displays dwindled because of heightened competition from Chinese manufacturers. Smartphone exports jumped nearly 37% on year last month to nearly $1.2 billion, despite having the disadvantage of having to cater to a highly saturated market. Exports of computers rose more than 12% on year to $110 million. By region, exports to China marked a record high at $11.6 billion in September, a near 17% increase from the same month last year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Last week, 5 South Korean climbers were killed in a snowstorm while trying to scale a 7,000-meter-high mountain in the Himalayas. On Wednesday, their bodies arrived back home. Yoon Jung-min has the latest.
The bodies arrived at Incheon International Airport at 5 a.m. on Wednesday on a flight from Kathmandu, Nepal. The caskets were carried by families and friends of the deceased who were waiting at the cargo terminal. The group of climbers, led by famous mountaineer Kim Chang-ho, were found dead Saturday near their base camp on Mount Gurja in western Nepal. The 5 climbers were struck by a snowstorm while pioneering a new trekking route to the 7,000-meter Mount Gurja. 49-year-old Kim, who has some 30 years of mountaineering experience, was the first South Korean to scale all 14 peaks above 8,000 meters without using supplemental oxygen. Kim also showed great loyalty to his colleagues. Back in 2011, he volunteered to find a colleague who was lost on Annapurna and never made it back. In 2013, he was stricken with grief when he lost one of his group members while descending an 8,000-meter mountain in the Himalayas. A joint memorial for the 5 mountaineers will be held on Friday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
President Moon Jae-in is now in Italy for meetings with the country's president and prime minister. The highlights, however, are expected to be the special mass dedicated to peace on the Korean Peninsula on Wednesday local time and a sit-down with Pope Francis on Thursday. Shin Se-min reports from Rome.
Rome is the second leg of President Moon Jae-in's 5-nation trip around Europe. After wrapping up his 4-day state visit to France, where he shored up the tight relationship between the two sides, the South Korean leader is looking to do the same in Italy, again on the issue of his administration's engagement with North Korea. President Moon will meet with the Italian president and prime minister on Wednesday before heading to the Vatican later in the day. Cardinal Pietro Parolin will preside over a Mass for Peace on the Korean Peninsula at St. Peter's Basilica, in which President Moon, himself of the Catholic faith, will participate. It's a rare opportunity for President Moon and the Roman Catholic Church, as the Vatican hardly ever holds a special Mass for specific countries. Prior to his arrival, President Moon wrote an article published in L'Osservatore Romano, a daily paper in the Holy See, urging the Vatican to engage with North Korea and back Seoul's efforts to denuclearize the regime for the sake of peace in the region. On Thursday, President Moon will sit down with Pope Francis for around an hour, where he will relay an invitation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for the Pope to visit Pyongyang. The South Korean leader will then leave for Brussels for the Asia-Europe Summit, or ASEM, in the evening. Although it's just the second leg of his marathon trip to Europe, much of the attention is being focused on his less than 3-day stay here in Rome and the Vatican, as the world is keen to learn on whether the head of the Roman Catholic Church will actually become the first pontiff to visit the now not-so-reclusive regime of North Korea. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Rome.
Now, for a further look at President Moon's visit to Rome, we have joining us Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung University. It's good to have you back on the show.
Good to be here.
So the highlight, as we mentioned, of President Moon's visit to Italy will be his visit with one of the special mass, the mass that will be held in the Vatican, dedicated to peace on the Korean Peninsula. Now, it's very rare for the Vatican to put on such an event like this. I mean, How significant is this, do you think?
I think it's significant to an extent. Holy Father has more than one occasion expressed his wish, compassion and interest in the Korean Peninsula's peace. So I think that in that sense, it keeps the news on the front burner or the front page that he has expressed this interest. He's a global leader, spiritual leader, and has a lot of interest, influence on the global opinion shaping and the agenda. So politically, he might not be similar to the meeting with President Macron or other the the Security Council members, but in an overall effort to promote the peace in the Korean Peninsula and shape the global opinion towards more peace and more prosperous deal between the global community and North Korea. In that sense, it's a significant and a progress.
So President Moon will be meeting the Pope, sitting down one-on-one with him on Thursday, and he's set to relay an invitation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for the Pope to visit North Korea. The question is, will the Pope accept?
Well, this is not the first time that this discussion has arisen. From the time of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un, they all expressed one way or the other to host Holy Father. I think that Pope Francis wants to go too, not only because North Korea represents kind of an end of the earth place that the Christians has to go, but at the same time his personal interest is pretty big. From the North Korea's point of view, I think that they would welcome this opportunity because the Pope visiting this country probably will look like the North Korea is a normal country, which is a significant break from their current image as a rogue nation brandishing nuclear weapons to the whole world. So in that sense, both the interests are there. I think the risk is that North Korea is still pretty horrible in the track record and the human rights, and also religious freedom is not guaranteed. So in that sense, the Vatican will be very careful not to legitimize North Korea being a country of that degree of normalcy by allowing the visit of the Pope Francis.
Isn't there also a risk from the North Korean side as well, by having some religious figure like this coming to North Korea, that it could have some sort of effect among the people in North Korea as well? I think that's one of the reasons that was given in a book recently by a defector, Tae Young-ho, who said that they did originally try to have the previous Pope come visit, but there was concerns and it didn't really happen.
Well, it seems like that's the theme running through Kim Jong-un's regime. Limited degree of openness, and I think it was a pretty impressive sight to see that President Moon addressing the citizens of Pyongyang. So I think that especially in the Dove section of North Korea, there is a need to open up the country to an extent so that they can go down the route of the economic development. I think that they probably feel a little bit secure in that they can at least control the situations, at least in Pyongyang. Probably they would not let other leaders roam free in North Korea.
So before that, on Wednesday, though, President Moon will be holding a summit meeting with the Prime Minister Conte of Italy as well. So President Moon expected to deliver a similar message that he delivered to the French President Macron of France, the importance of offering an easing of sanctions to North Korea in order to convince them to denuclearize. How do you think Conte will react?
Well, I think that President Conte will probably sound in the same line as the European Union has counted. Remember that the significant sanctions from United Nations and the United States, but also European Union has a significant sanction on North Korea. That's why President Macron was very reserved and pretty, if you have to pick a side, pretty negative on easing the sanction at this point, because he, in a way, represents the EU's position. I think that the President Conte will not deviate much from that position, and I think they recognize that also the sanction is a very big piece of the puzzle or the chip in the negotiation between the North Korea and the United States. So they would not go out of their ways to disrupt that negotiation progress to invite the ire of President Trump.
Yes. If you move on to that, so the US has been reluctant to back any kind of notions about easing of sanctions at all. So it is, after all, the key card, as you mentioned, that Washington can play to put pressure on North Korea. So this seems to be causing there seems to be a strain between what President Moon is pushing for in his agenda and what the US wants as well. They seem to be pulling on either sides. Do you think this could lead to some sort of problem, or are they ultimately on the same page and this is just a domestic squabble as such?
Well, hopefully they're on the same page, and I think that there is a ample reason to see that they're on the same side, but they're playing a different role. United States, of course, is the main actor on the negotiation table, but President Moon has played and continued to play the mediator role. And from that basis, President Moon's worry is that, as happened before, the tougher sanction or the too tough of a stance will be a deal breaker. So President Moon has a tough task of pulling North Korea on the table and also the United States. So I think that they're working towards the same goal of making the negotiation happen and also the peace process to go forward. I think the risk, significant risk is there, as you mentioned, that the subject of easing the sanction is very much a hot potato at this point. If you progress too far, then probably the negotiation process will be disrupted, and President Trump at this point might pull out. He probably needed the North Korea achievement as a very important item before the midterm election. But at this point, with the Kavanaugh confirmed and all, he is riding pretty high at this point, so probably the urgency is not there. I think the President Moon, what he can hope for at this point in terms of easing the sanction would be, for example, making a South Korea-North Korea cooperation as a kind of an exception, limited exception to the whole sanction regime, but disrupting the whole sanction idea or the sanction regime at this point is very risky.
What's interesting about all these talks of sanctions in the last couple of weeks is the fact that they talk about the end of declaration of the Korean War. That talk of the declaration seems to have taken a back seat. North Korean state media used to talk about, that's all they used to talk about. But now they're making commentaries saying the sanctions are a hostile policy by the US and they need to be lifted and all these kinds of things. Do you think the end of war declaration has taken a back seat, and now sanctions seem to be key issues that are being negotiated between the US and North Korea, perhaps in the background?
It's a little bit curious and also not unexpected, meaning that I think that the easing of sanction and some kind of economic boon has always been the kind of ultimate or near ultimate goal of North Korea. So it was a matter of time that that agenda comes to the fore. But at this point, it's curious whether they think that the end of the war declaration is something that is in their pocket already, or they think that it is a time to have that main agenda to come to the fore. I think that the negotiation happening behind the scene is something that is not well publicized at this point. But if that is true, probably North Korea is calculating at this point that this is a time to kind of push forward, so that when the negotiation happens in Washington or elsewhere, that the negotiation will start from that base where that sanction has been out there, sanction agenda has been out there, and from their hope, having been garnered some support from not only from South Korea, but European countries and others.
This talk about sanctions, does it suggest that maybe the economic situation in North Korea is perhaps more urgent than having to declare the end of the Korean War?
Well, at this point, it's hard to say, because there is no indication that it has particularly deteriorated. But on the other side, the implementation of the sanction mechanism has been toughening up, especially smuggling oils and other items from the international sea to North Korea has been toughened. But I think the more important factor is that by having a summit meetings and announcing and anticipating the summit meeting with the United States, North Korean leader has elected to open up this aspect of it, publicized and known to to the North Korean people. So there's this built-in expectation that something should happen soon. And that something is a major ticket item because North Korea has been building up this nuclear weaponry and the power. And by giving up the nuclear weapon, they're expecting some big opportunity in return. So if it does not come forward, probably the reputation, I wonder how much the Kim cares about his reputation or the opinion poll, but in that sense, his base or legitimacy of his governing position probably will be a little bit weakened if the expectation is not met.
On the sidelines of all this right now, so U.S. Special Representative of North Korea, Stephen Biegun, who was recently appointed to that post, met with Russian officials on Tuesday. Now, little details have been given about that meeting, but all we know is that they talked about North Korea's denuclearization. What do you think the U.S. is looking to gain from a meeting like this, especially when Biegun has not even met with his North Korean counterpart, Chesoni, which they said they would do soon?
Right. I think that's a separate discussion, but on the Russian side, I can only speculate because of the lack of report. But remember that North Korea reached out to not only China, which they seem like they are in a very cozy position, communicating frequently, but they reached out to Russia, and that was seen as a move to have another friend on their side in the negotiation. So in that sense, the United States' need to at least keep Russia in check or even neutralize the negotiation position that North Korea has, having a friendly relationship with Russia. So I think that the U.S. will continue to try to see what the situation is and reach out and have Russia not play a decisive deal-breaker role or too much of a white knight role on the negotiation.
One more topic I'd like to get your thought on as well. So on Tuesday, the two Koreas and the UN command on that's in charge of the border area on the Korean Peninsula, the three sides met for a trilateral meeting at Panmunjom on Tuesday to discuss how to disarm the joint security area as well as part of the military agreement that was agreed between the two Koreas last month. So it seems to be just a first step, an initial meeting to discuss how to move things forwards, and there hasn't been a lot of details that came out of it.
Right.
But what does it mean, the fact that these three sides met at all and they were able to sit down and have a discussion?
I think it's a progress in a limited sense. I say limited sense because the fact that they sat down together and getting into details, it's a welcome sign, and that moves the agreements that the summit meeting has produced from the declaration to a more operational side. But it's a limited significance because, the DMZ, demilitarized zone, was supposed to be demilitarized, but the DMZ, including the Panmunjom, is the most heavily militarized zone in the world. And that has a little bit of history. In 1976, there was an axe murder provocation from the north, and from then on, the situation has worsened. So at least going back to more of a demilitarized area, or that condition probably is not a progress from the peace point of view, but sort of a normalizing the situation in the area that has been worsened because of the past incidents. But however, getting together and talking about the details, I think that can provide a foundation for a lot of good things to move forward, especially because the peace process is the main item.
That's where we'll end it. Thank you for coming in, Professor, and as always, it's always great to get your thoughts on the latest developments.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So that's where we will close out our show. Be sure to tune in to our later newscasts for the latest updates. And in the meantime, hope you're having a good day. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.
네, 조선시대 궁중요리가 준비되어 있습니다.
도착하시면 바로 드실 수 있으세요.
부드러움과 풍미를 가지고 있는 한우가 준비되어 있습니다.